Some of you may have noticed that PlayStation 5 has been making headlines because of a new revision that's making some minor, quiet changes that are supposed to not be a big deal, but YouTuber Austin Evans got a hold of this new revision and discovered that the temperatures are a bit higher on this new model than on the previous one, though whether that has huge ramifications on the long-term viability and lifespan of the console is another matter entirely, but I figured I'd go through this story and give you my take on it. So here's Austin Evans' video. One of the first things he points out is this tweet of someone spotting this new revision, this new model of PS5 that isn't a refresh like a PS5 Slim or anything. It's just little tweaks here and there that makes this a different SKU. So Roberto Sarano tweeted, new PS5 model CFI1115A spotted in the latest wireless communication module M20DAL1 registered by Sony Group Core on April 26, 2021. This suggests a revision of PlayStation 5 is coming sooner or later, already registered on May 23, 2021. Now, Austin Evans managed to get a hold of this new revision, and he compared and contrasted them right here. This is the new revision, this is the old revision, and he does have the digital edition of the console. In terms of exterior and basic functionality, it's identical, damn near identical, but he did start to notice as he was comparing and contrasting that temperatures were different in the original PS5 versus the new revision. So in the original PlayStation 5, he'd get temperatures on the back of the console that averaged around 52 degrees Celsius, but fast forwarding a little forward, you'll see the temperatures on the new version, on the revision, is a little higher at 55 degrees Celsius, and generally he stated that he noticed the temperature difference of roughly 3 to 5 degrees Celsius. And on top of that, weighing both PS5s, it was noted how the two consoles actually weigh a little different. The new revision is actually slightly lighter, which led Austin Evans to conclude that perhaps the cooling of the new revision has been modified, maybe diminished. Now, as he was deconstructing the console, one of the first things he noticed is that the fan is a little different on the new PS5. The revision's fan actually has larger blades, likely to compensate for some of the reductions in other areas that I'll get to in a bit. As Austin Evans broke down the console further, it was noticed how the top right here is different. So this is the old version that has more of a copper piece right here, whereas this is a smaller, more maybe aluminum piece on the right. Besides the fact that there seems to be less copper, which I believe is the preferred material for heatsinks, you can see how the size difference is noticeable based on the fact that you can actually fit a finger on this right side here, whereas you can't do that in the original version with the bigger heatsink. So both size and material difference can be spotted before they've fully deconstructed the console, which finally brings us to this shot right here where you can really see the difference between the two heatsinks. On the left, you've got the original. You can see how much more copper and just how much more heatsink there is here compared to what is a significantly smaller and less copper-infused heatsink. This would explain why the new revision is slightly lighter, and also, according to Austin Evans, this may explain why the console runs slightly hotter. The new revision is about 300 grams lighter, and you can see that in this weight comparison of the old one, which is 1,639 grams when measured, versus the new one, which is closer to 1,368 grams, a difference of almost 300 grams. Austin Evans also did measure the noise emitted by the new revision and the amount of power that it draws, and apparently, while the differences are for the most part negligible, the console does have slightly higher wattage, but it is also slightly quieter than the old version. Now, it wasn't long before this story began to spread, and some people began to get really concerned about Sony cutting costs on one aspect of PlayStation consoles that has always been a sticking point: overheating. PlayStation 4, for example, sounded like a jet engine when it was running on all cylinders, and it got really hot, and I can attest this myself as a PlayStation 4 owner. And PS3 also had similar issues with heat and noise. PS5 has been much better on that front, and so the concern is that Sony's starting to cut back on this stuff and maybe will start shifting more towards the less than ideal heating or cooling solution of past consoles. But A lot of people are also pointing out how, that 3 to 5 degrees Celsius difference, it is a difference, but is this the end of the world? Is the PS5 gonna melt? Is it gonna cause significant long-term issues? Generally, the consensus to that seems to be no. What the theory right now is that Sony almost went overboard with the cooling solution for the original PlayStation 5 models, and as they started to get more results and data from people buying these consoles and using them, they probably realized that they actually can cut back a little on the heatsink and still have a console that runs cool enough while being able to cut back costs and adjust how they build their PlayStation 5s to be just a little more cost efficient is the theory out there. And it's also worth noting that little tweaks like this happening throughout a console's lifespan, throughout a console's generational cycle, isn't uncommon. This is something that does happen where little tweaks are made here and there as new, smaller SKU revisions are released. Not to mention that Austin Evans' testing isn't necessarily scientific. It was pointed out how measuring the temperature of air that's being blown out back isn't necessarily the best way to gauge the internal temperatures, as this could potentially be an indication that the cooling system is actually doing a good job at spreading the air and expelling it, and that's why the exterior temperature as the air is being blown out, as the heat is being blown out, might be higher. That's one potential theory. Austin Evans actually responded to people relaying other potential possibilities. A couple people mentioning higher exhaust temps could mean that the cooler is doing a better job dissipating heat. The thing is, Sony removed a sizable amount of the heatsink on this new model. With fewer fins and smaller heat pipes, it simply isn't as efficient at moving the heat out of the console. Think about it as if it were a PC. If I remove a large CPU sink in favor of a smaller one, the exhaust coming off my system would be hotter as the overall system temps are higher since the weaker cooler can't cope. That's exactly what's going on here, in my opinion. I'm not an expert in this field, so I couldn't tell you myself which one of these hypotheses is more likely than the other, but I think it does make sense that if you have a smaller heatsink, then you are going to get slightly higher temperatures. But regardless of which theory turns out to be correct, yes, this is a slightly worse version of the PS5 and that is a little hotter, but do I think it's going to create adverse long-term situations? I guess time will tell. I don't think, and a lot of people don't seem to think, this is the biggest deal in the world, though still worth calling out, still worth keeping an eye on, just in case. As long as components continue to be within a certain safe range of temperature for these chips, then you'll be fine. And from what I can see, nobody said that suddenly the temperatures on the PS5 has crossed a certain line or threshold that makes it a not viable solution as far as cooling goes. Though there are plenty of tech channels and content creators out there who are no doubt going to do more experimentation just to make sure, just to really gauge exactly why the temperature increase is happening. Is it really about that heat dissipation? Does that slight increase in temperature make all that much of a difference in how efficiently the console runs all of its components like the CPU and GPU, whether this can cause throttling down the line, whether it's really going to be detrimental to the console's health? Stuff like that I'm sure we'll find out. I wouldn't think Sony's stupid enough to scale back on cooling to the point where it would have significant long-term adverse effects, but I guess you never know, and because of Sony's past history with cooling issues, I understand why the concerns have been raised, and I still think this is something worth paying attention to until we get more conclusive findings. But that's just one man's take on everything. Let me know in the comments below what you think about the new revision and its slightly increased temperature as a result of the scaled back heatsink. Based on the results seen so far, are you concerned about this, or do you think some people are blowing this out of proportion and ultimately this difference is negligible enough? Share your thoughts below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.